Thank you for joining Gender Justice this evening. We are here tonight to honor the life and legacy of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Gender Justice is a legal and policy advocacy nonprofit dedicated to advancing gender equity through the law. Since our founding 10 years ago, Gender Justice has been inspired by RBG's work and driven by her goal of ending discrimination on the basis of sex. Much of her work today builds on the foundation she laid, fighting discrimination, protecting the rights of pregnant, parenting, or breastfeeding workers, ensuring trans and gender nonconforming people have access to health care, and challenging Minnesota's unconstitutional abortion laws. In this and everything we do, we are committed to carrying on Ruth Bader Ginsburg's legacy. And we are certainly not going to stop now. I stand before you this evening, someone who's crushed. When I learned of Justice Ginsburg's passing, I literally fell to the floor. At that moment, I realized that a woman who had been almost denied entry to law school, who had been told her whole life that she couldn't do things, that she shouldn't do things, she didn't say, okay, I guess not. She said, no, I'm going to go do that. And so I got off the floor and I started organizing this event, creating this space for us to grieve, to be together, and make our next steps. And I'm not doing it alone. I want to thank our organizational co-hosts, the ACLU of Minnesota, NARAL Pro-Choice Minnesota, and thank you for being our mask marshals, NARAL Pro-Choice America, Family Tree Clinic, thank you for providing our ASL interpreters, the Indigenous Peoples Task Force, the First Unitarian Society of Minnesota, Twin Cities Diversity in Practice, the National Council of Jewish Women in Minnesota, ACLU Mitchell-Hamlin Student Chapter. I want to thank the Minneapolis Park Board and the City of Minneapolis. I want to thank Melissa Lund and Megan, our interpreters. Organizational partners continue to include Outfront Minnesota, Take Action Minnesota, Outlaw Mitchell-Hamlin of Law School, Jewish Community Action, Unrestrict Minnesota, Minnesota AFL-CIO, the Immigrant Law, Our Justice, Courts Matter Minnesota, Just the Pill, Violence Free Minnesota, Women Act, Planned Parenthood of North Central States, Jeremy Bierlein, Ken, and Will, and everybody who came up.
We're good?
All right, thank you for bearing with us. The sound. So this is hard, right? This is painful. It's okay to not be okay. May Justice Ginsburg memory be a revolution. Next to lead us in prayer, please welcome Rabbi Latz of Shir Tikva congregation.
Seems kind of perfect that it's raining, eh? Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. These are the words we Jews say when someone dies. Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. Blessed is the judge of truth. How powerful these words are to recite for Justice Ginsburg. Blessed is the judge of truth. She was America's justice, holding in her tiny cancer-weary body the pain and the promise of America. We were blessed by her fortitude, by her vision, and a commitment to the law as an expression of justice in the world, by her dedication to equality, women's equality, GLBTQ equality, racial justice, climate justice, and the right to vote. Justice Ginsburg was a champion for justice. She was our champion. Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. In Judaism, we believe that the truly righteous die on Shabbat, our Sabbath day. How much more so for the righteous one, this righteous one, to die on Rosh Hashanah, as Jews around the world celebrate the new year. Here is what we are not going to do in her memory. We are not going to despair. Despair is the elixir of tyrants. When we despair, weak men, weak leaders try to make us, there goes my keeper. See, even God agrees. Try to make us believe, thank you, Aaron, that somehow our voices don't matter and we don't count. So in RBG's memory, we will make her memory a blessing. We will make her memory a revolution. We will rise up. We will vote. We will demand no less of ourselves than she expected of herself, to be a modest, humble, fierce justice for human dignity and equality for every person in this land. In Justice Bader Ginsburg memory, we sound the shofar to mark the new year, to wake us up, to call us forth to seek justice. So in the new year, let the great shofar sound for freedom. May her cry be heard in every hamlet and every city, in every farm and every mountaintop. In the words of the prophet Amos, let justice roll down like waters, thank you, and righteousness like a mighty stream. If you are able in body or in spirit, I invite you to rise as we sound the shofar in RBG's memory and to ring in the new year. My friend Jacob Andrews is our Baal Tekiah, our shofar sounder. Tekiah. Shavarim. Trua. Tekiah Gedolah. May her memory be a revolution.
Thank you so much. Next, I'd like to invite my friend and the Executive Director of Jewish Community Action to the stage, Karen Moratz.
Stopped raining. God saw a Jewish woman with a blowout.
Yes, she did.
And it was so. Come on up, babe. This is my daughter, Miriam. She's joining me tonight. In 2015, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was asked by American Jewish World Service to write an insert for their Passover Haggadah. She did. What's up? She did, and she chose to focus not on Moses, the great liberator, or even on God. She focused on the women who drove the Jewish people's most central story of liberation. On Yocheved, Moses' mother, who gave up her son to save his life. On the midwives, Shifra and Puah, who disobeyed the Pharaoh's orders and refused to kill Israelite baby boys. On Miriam, Moses' sister, who kept an eye on him as he grew up in Pharaoh's court, and on Batya, the Pharaoh's daughter, who defied her own father and took Moses from the Nile and raised him as her own. The handmaidens told Batya, our mistress, it is the way of the world that when a king issues a decree, his children and the members of his household do observe it, and you wish to transgress your father's decree. Justice Ginsburg wrote, transgress she did. In her Haggadah insert, our nation's second female Supreme Court justice wrote that those women had a vision leading out of the darkness shrouding their world. They were women of action, prepared to defy authority, to make their vision a reality, bathed in the light of the day. That is who she was to us. She wrote, retelling the heroic stories of Yocheved, Shifra, Puah, Miriam, and Batya reminds our daughters that with vision and the courage to act, they can carry forward the tradition those intrepid women launched. And so we retell the heroic story of Ruth. Justice Ginsburg grew up in a Jewish family in Brooklyn. During her Supreme Court confirmation hearing in 1993, when I was a senior in high school watching, she talked about her father, a Jewish immigrant from Ukraine, and her mother, barely a second-generation American. Her family had come to America to escape religious persecution, and it was here that she was raised to be a woman and a traditional Jew. When her mother died the day before young Ruth's high school graduation, and Ruth, as a woman, was not allowed to be counted in the minyan, the public prayer, she felt this was an affront to her mother, and she broke from the traditional observance that she'd been raised with. Put off by sexism and patriarchy, she dissented. She found a different way to be a Jew, which many of us here will recognize as an extremely Jewish act.
Amen.
Justice Ginsburg practiced her Judaism through a relentless pursuit of justice. She named this often. She said, "I am a judge for peace and for enlightenment," runs through the entirety of Jewish history and Jewish tradition. On the wall of her office in the Supreme Court hung a plaque bearing a quote from Deuteronomy, "Tzedek, tzedek tirdof," justice, justice shall you pursue. She pursued justice in the broader world, and she pursued justice for her own Jewish community. She successfully fought to end the Supreme Court's practice of hearing cases on Yom Kippur, our holiest day, which we'll observe next week. She successfully encouraged the court to eliminate "in the year of our Lord" from official language, arguing that for Jews, explicitly framing the calendar year as Christian was offensive. In life, she often framed her identity as three strikes against her. She was a Jew, she was a woman, and she was a mother. But these strikes shaped her perspective and drove her fight, and many of us who share these identities, and many of us who don't, owe her a great debt. My own mother, from a very similar family, though not in Brooklyn, but Queens, very far apart, she told me her story, and that I should share it, that in the late 1960s, when she was pregnant with my oldest brother, she was forced to leave her teaching position, and that another Jewish mother in the next decade would draft the Pregnancy Discrimination Act, which would make that illegal, meant a lot to my mother and to me and to my daughter. Justice Ginsburg died on Erev Rosh Hashanah, just before the new year. She did not join us as we stepped into 5781. That's significant. One of our community's beliefs is that only very righteous people die at the very end of the year because they were needed until the very end. She got the entire year. A Jewish colleague wrote on Friday night that "I am telling myself that RBG felt able to transition on this Rosh Hashanah because of her faith in us. We needed her for every moment of 5780, and she believed in us to carry on her work into 5781. A final thought. When a Jew dies, we say Zichrono Livracha. That means may their memory be a blessing. It means when you think of the person who has passed on, when you remember them, may the memory bless you. It is a forward-looking sentiment. It is optimistic and it is hopeful, and we are willing the memories of our loved ones to inspire us and to drive us to carry on their legacy of goodness and justice in the world. The legacy of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg demands nothing less than that her memory should drive us to carry While there is much light in today's world, there remains in our universe disheartening darkness, inhumanity spawned by ignorance and hate. She went on, instructing us that with vision and action, we can join hands with others of like mind, kindling lights along paths leading out of the terrifying darkness. And so with lights kindled together here together tonight, we say for Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Zichrono Livracha, may her memory be a blessing.
Thank you, Karen and Miriam. Next, I'd like to invite somebody to the stage to speak that can offer a perspective that a lot of us don't have. RBG can feel like a lot of hours. We wear t-shirts and pins and earrings and dissent collars, and we have her on tote bags, and she inspires mothers and toddlers and middle schoolers. But not all of us got to actually know her and spend time with her. But I want to invite somebody up who did. Please welcome to the stage Senior Staff Attorney at the Advocates for Human Rights and the former clerk for Justice Ginsburg, Amy Bergquist.
Thank you all for coming and tuning in to celebrate the life and legacy of Justice Ginsburg. It was humbling to clerk for Justice Ginsburg and to see firsthand her brilliant intellect at work. She was tirelessly dedicated to the work of the court and to advancing the cause of justice. So tireless, in fact, that she sometimes asked me or one of my co-clerks to join her for a workout session with her personal trainer. She would run on the elliptical machine and lift weights while dictating line edits. The words of another judge I worked for, Judge William Fletcher, speaking about his mother, Judge Betty Binns Fletcher, apply with equal force to Justice Ginsburg. She spoke truth to power, and just as important, she spoke truth in exercising power. On the wall just outside Justice Ginsburg's office hangs a gift she received while I was clerking for her. It is a framed official version of the 2-page Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act of 2009, along with an autographed photograph of President Barack Obama signing the act into law. The Lilly Ledbetter Act, the first bill President Obama signed into law, amended Title VII of the Civil Rights Act to clarify that the statute of limitations for filing an equal pay lawsuit resets with each new paycheck affected by the employer's discrimination. 2 years earlier, the Supreme Court, in a 5-4 decision, with Justice Ginsburg writing the dissent, held that the statute of limitations began to run when the employer first made a discriminatory pay determination, thereby barring most women from bringing pay discrimination claims because they usually uncovered the discrimination only years after it began. This gift and its prominence in chambers point to an important lesson I learned from Justice Ginsburg. Sometimes the court doesn't or can't get it right, either because the statutes are badly written, precedent doesn't give enough room to maneuver, or there just aren't enough votes. But in her powerful dissents, she often sowed the seeds for achieving longer-term social justice. Her dissent in the Ledbetter case called on Congress to take up the baton, and it did. Sometimes change comes through the courts, but sometimes the onus is on Congress, and in some cases, we build movements to lay the groundwork for social justice. We mourn Justice Ginsburg, but we must see it not as a defeat. She has sown the seeds for social justice, not only in her opinions, speech, her life story, but also in all of us, from lawyers arguing at the highest court in the land to children dressed up as the notorious RBG for Halloween. She has left us a legacy, and that legacy calls on every one of us to mobilize, to nurture those seedlings in the courts, Congress, and state legislatures, administrative agencies, and the ballot box, and yes, to build social movements to change hearts and minds. As Minnesotans, we've learned these lessons over the last decade. When we confronted the setback of a ballot initiative that would change our Constitution to deny same-sex couples the right to marry, we couldn't rely on the courts or the legislature to set things right. We mobilized, working tirelessly to have difficult, heartfelt conversations with friends, family, neighbors, and perfect strangers. And we were the first state to fight back and defeat such an initiative. But in building that movement, we sowed the seeds for our legislators to enshrine marriage equality into law. Justice Kennedy eventually caught up to us. I want to add that Justice Ginsburg's first area of legal expertise was not gender equality, it was civil procedure. Civil procedure is about the rules, the legal framework that allows people to know where they stand and what to expect. It's about fairness and the rule of law, but rules are also important for reinforcing the integrity and credibility of the institutions that articulate those rules. So when I learned of the justice's last fervent wish, I knew It was rooted in her belief that a rule is meaningless if it is good for one day only, to be discarded when it is not politically expedient. The political machinations that began before the ink was even dry on her death certificate are an affront to the rule of law and undermine the legitimacy of the elected branches of our federal government. We must remember that whether we are bringing a lawsuit, lobbying our elected officials, protesting in the streets, voting, or having those difficult conversations with our relatives and neighbors, we too are speaking truth in exercising power. And we all have the power to speak our truth. We stand here at the beginning of the Jewish New Year, but also at the start of the harvest season. It is time to begin the hard work of picking up where Justice Ginsburg left off. May her legacy flourish and bear blessings in and for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Many of us know Ruth Bader Ginsburg because of her work on the Supreme Court, but she spent a lot of time at the ACLU Women's Rights Project. So to speak more about her rich history with the ACLU, I would like to welcome the Secretary of the Board of Directors at ACLU Minnesota and an attorney at Stinson, Larissa Maldonado.
So much for being here. I'm honored to share the space with you. And thank you for sitting through the cold and the wind and the rain like a classic Minnesota night. In the words of Justice Ginsburg, women's rights are an essential part of the overall human rights agenda, trained on the equal dignity and ability to live in freedom all people should enjoy. Accordingly, she lived that mission as a pioneer for gender equality. In 1972, it was a big year for gender equality. That was the year that the Equal Rights Amendment passed in Congress. It kicked off a decade of gender equality. Ginsburg was a strong supporter of the ERA, saying the amendment would eliminate the historic impediment to recognition of equal rights and responsibilities for men and women as constitutional, as a clear statement of the nation's moral and legal commitment system in which men and women stand as full and equal individuals before the law. In 1972, Justice Ginsburg also became a founding director of the National ACLU's Women's Rights Project. She served until 1980. Ginsburg imagined that men create new traditions through their actions if artificial barriers are removed and the avenues for opportunity is held open for them. Justice Ginsburg led the ACLU's battle in courts that expanded civil rights law, establishing the foundation for current legal prohibitions against sex discrimination, and laid the foundation for the women's and gender rights advocacy that we continue to work on today. She was involved in over 300 sex discrimination cases, including 6 in front of the then all-male Supreme Court. Ginsburg would occasionally use the strategy of identifying a male plaintiff that could more easily be identified with by the male jurists. She was able to show that sex-based discrimination and distinctions harm men, women, and families. The result was overturning laws and assumptions that men were breadwinners and women were subordinates and dependents. Ginsburg and the ACLU unraveled notions that women should be protected, meaning prohibited, from careers like policing and firefighting or from serving on juries. One of Ginsburg's early cases with the ACLU in front of the Supreme Court, Reed versus Reed, invalidated an Ohio statute that automatically gave preference to men in appointment as administrators of decedents' estates. There, the majority of justices agreed that women were a protected class. The Supreme Court in that case held for the very first time that a law categorically providing for differential treatment of men and women violates the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. The result was that there was now required to have a rational relationship between the classification based on sex and a legitimate state interest. Ginsburg's co-director of the Women's Rights Project, Barbara Fine, recalled that the team had a workflow whereby, quote, Ruth would create an argument, we would draft a section, then hand it back to her for rewriting and editing. What emerged from this process, what would go back into legal history, Ruth wrote about the reasons that men and women should be treated as women should be treated as first-class citizens. She didn't confine her observations to old cases and legal precedent. Instead, she took sections from ancient opinions to reveal just how antiquated a government's position really was. The first case that Ginsburg argued in front of the Supreme Court, Frontero versus Richardson, advocated for the application of strict scrutiny in cases of gender discrimination in the same way the concept was applied for race discrimination. In that case, a husband was denied spousal benefits for his wife's work in uniformed services because he couldn't prove that he relied more than half on his wife's support. And demonstrating this kind of economic dependence was not a required showing for women seeking the benefits from their husbands. Ginsburg rejected this differential treatment based on gender as inherently harmful to all involved. One of her co-counsel recalled that they had never heard an oral argument as unbelievably cogent as hers. Not a single justice asked a single question. I think they were mesmerized by her. While 4 justices sided with the ACLU and Ginsburg, this was 1 vote short of a majority. There was a series of subsequent decisions establishing an intermediate standard of review requiring that the government show that any sex discrimination it set forth had a substantial relationship to an important state interest. In Weinberger versus Weinfeld, Ginsburg successfully argued against a provision in the Social Security Act that denied widowed fathers benefits that were available to widowed mothers. Ginsburg argued that the classification discriminated against working women whose Social Security taxes garnered fewer benefits than the taxes paid by working men. The law also denied men the same opportunity as women to care for their children. Under Ginsburg's leadership, the Women's Rights Project also began its work to help women gain access to traditionally male jobs. Justice Ginsburg inspired those around her and those that she worked with. Margaret Moses, one of Ginsburg's colleagues at the Women's Rights Project, remarked that she was an excellent role model. That combination of being brilliant and working very hard set a very high standard that encouraged everyone to do the very best they could to emulate her. The ACLU, like our country, is left better for the immeasurable contributions of Justice Ginsburg. I, as a woman and as a mother and as a lawyer and as a professional, am thankful, am honored by the work that Justice Ginsburg did and the work of her generation to pave the way. And I'm encouraged to see the work of organizations like Gender Justice, the ACLU, and many of our partners as we continue this fight, as we continue marching forward. Our work isn't done. We have to keep moving. We have to keep fighting. We have to keep coming out in the rain and the cold like we are here tonight. Please, we need you. Show up. Make this happen. Make this a better world for our daughters, for our sons. Make this the world that Justice Ginsburg would be proud of. Keep fighting the good fight. Thank you.
Thank you, Larissa. Next, I would like to welcome the Dean and William S. Patty Professor of Law at the University of Minnesota Law School, Gary Jenkins.
I'm still heartbroken from Friday night's news, but I'm honored and lifted to be with all of you tonight to come together to mourn, to remember the trailblazing U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was just 5 feet tall, maybe 100 pounds soaking wet, but she was a towering figure, a veritable giant of American jurisprudence, and in recent years, a giant of American culture. The notorious RBG was rightfully lionized as a champion for justice. When President Clinton nominated her to the Supreme Court, he called her the Thurgood Marshall of gender equity law. She was already an iconic lawyer leader, an accomplished litigator and strategist and jurist of the first order. We just heard about her history-making run as director of the Women's Rights Project at the ACLU. Then add on to that a 40-year career on the federal judiciary, 27 of those years on the Supreme Court. On the court, she changed the country. She helped establish critical precedent that empowered the EPA to address greenhouse gas emissions driving climate change. She changed ideas of marriage. She expanded notions of disability rights. She protected women's rights to make choices about their lives and made it clear that gender equality is a constitutional right. You know, her lucid jurisprudence was grounded in commitments to opportunity and equality. And to be clear, that didn't always mean that a female litigant who was raising gender issues was favored or always won with her. But it did mean implementation of a jurisprudence that treated women as full citizens, which sometimes came with unfortunate consequences for a particular litigant, but it ensured that women were treated no differently from their husbands, from their brothers, from their fathers, or their neighbors. Now, in addition, especially in her later years, as the court makeup changed, she spoke plainly and powerfully in dissents when necessary. She even had a special fashion choice for the occasion, right? That the dissent collar. But she also prized collegiality, something that sometimes seems way too short in supply today. She leaves the country changed because of her life's work. Justice Ginsburg's passion for justice, her dogged pursuit of equal justice and eliminating discrimination of all types, and her commitment to the rule of law should and must serve as an inspiration and motivation for us to do our part to make the world a better place. And we do that over the long term by helping each other and our kids to believe in true justice and equality for all, no matter their race, their sex, their gender identity, their gender expression, their sexual orientation, and other basis. And we do that in the short term by voting, by volunteering, by donating, by engaging in the political process. I had the honor of being in the presence of the justice on a few occasions, and I will treasure each and every one of them for all of my life. While not the most recent, but certainly the most intimate, was in 2009, when the Justice visited Ohio State Law School, where I was then a professor and the associate dean. During that spellbinding visit, she said that she had found working in the law so tremendously satisfying because you will have a skill that you can contribute to your community. Because you are a lawyer, you can do things to make life a little better than it might be if you were not contributing your time and talent. There is no greater satisfaction than to give something to the community. That was her. That was the Justice. You know, it was a great speech, but one personal interaction that also stands out from that encounter, it was at a small dinner. She said to me, I hear that you were the lead coordinator of this visit. When someone says that to you, you take a big gulp, right? You worry that maybe, she was going to, complain about something. But she was as gracious as ever. She offered congratulations and words of thanks. And then she asked me how long I had been associate dean. And I said, I'm in my first year. I said I was in my first year. And she leaned in and she said, okay, give it a few more years. But don't you think it's about time there were more women and minority law school deans? I remain committed to finding ways to make a difference. I remain inspired by her. Justice Ginsburg inspired generations, particularly young women, but also anyone who believes in excellence and justice. She helped others see and appreciate the human and social impact of our judicial system, to see pathways for future lawyers to affect change in the world through law and advocacy. In these challenging times, we need new and more Ruth Bader Ginsburgs to step forward. In her oral dissent in the Supreme Court majority opinion that invalidated a key provision on the Voting Rights Act, she quoted a familiar MLK Jr. line, but she added to it, "The arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice." But she added, only if there is a steadfast commitment to see the task through to completion. She spent her life pushing to bend the arc. I hope that each of us will follow in her lead and keep bending that arc by seeing tasks to completion. Her death closes one chapter in America's ongoing national story of, in her words, the extension of constitutional rights and protections to people once ignored or excluded. So you know what? That means it's up to us to start writing a new chapter. Thank you, Justice Ginsburg. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gary. Next, I'd like to invite to the stage First Lady Gwen Walz and her husband. I think she's going to bring him with her, Governor Tim Walz.
And good evening. My name is Gwen Walz, and the governor happens to be married to me. Thank you so very much for letting us join you this evening. It's not at every event that I speak, but I chose tonight to speak and to speak first because I want to have my voice be in this space to encourage you to have your voice be in this space. I'm a native Minnesotan, And I went to college here and have lived almost my entire life here. And we have these sayings in Minnesota. And one of them is, what's next? Right? What's next? I think we determine what is next by thinking about people like RBG. Now, I carry this little pocket wisdom guide. It's called Ruth Bader Ginsburg's Pocket Wisdom Book. I'm not sure what she would think of that because it takes so many of her most memorable quotations and puts them into categories that you can easily pull from and read. But I never have it very far from my reach. I hope she's okay with that, because I want to thank her and I want her to be near me. How can we ever thank this visionary woman who changed the world for all of us? The answer I have for us tonight, for me, is that I think we fight. We fight with everything we have and everything we know and everything we are. We fight with our voices. A quotation from the justice herself has been a guiding principle for me. She said, "I'm dejected, but only momentarily when I can't get the fifth vote for something I think is very important. But then you go on to the next challenge and you give it your all." Let's give it our all. Let's find our voice. Let's fight. Justice Ginsburg understood hope. I believe that. But she also understood strategy, and she also understood planning and hard work. So tonight, when we ask what is next, we are looking inside of ourselves and with one another and with all of these beautiful lights all around us for hope. We plan, we work, we fight. We have much to fight for. I will be using my voice in that fight. You can count on me. As we mourn together, let us think about tomorrow. Let us think about this amazing woman who has given and shown us and taught us so much. I will continue to carry the pocket guide with me. But in my heart, I am going to carry her spirit. Let's build a more just future, beginning with our fight. I'd like to introduce to you my husband, the governor, Tim Walz.
I clearly married up, so. Well, thank you, Gwen. Thank you to Megan, Aaron, and Gender Justice for, as many have said, created this space. There is grieving. We can't do anything but that at times. You bring making us know that equality is not something that's negotiable, making us know on every single day that reproductive rights are human rights. And to these incredible legal minds that came here and legal career. But the part for so many of us. If you're not an attorney, and so many of us out here came to love and admire Justice Ginsburg. But I think for many of us, and me included, it was those quiet moments when things seemed like she was always there as the rock or the backstop, that justice and goodness and the light side of things will eventually win out. And to imagine the fights that she took on, and imagine these last few years, how many times we heard she went to the hospital and came back out and was working that day. Those were the moments that strengthened me. It seemed unbelievable. And then when word came Friday, and I don't think anything happened in northern Minnesota on Friday too. Some of it good and kind, and some of it hateful and divisive. And to come at that moment, it seems all too easy. It's a joke in 2020 with people of everything we've all, oh, what more can 2020 give us? And while we laugh for a little bit at it, the one thing is I worry a little bit at this, that it distracts from being very clear, like so many of these things that Justice Ginsburg fought against, make sure, discrimination based on gender, the right to marry who you love, access to health care, all of those things that mattered. It wasn't an act of nature that we didn't have those things. It was people making conscious choices to deny those things. It was people making conscious choices to discriminate. And as we sit here today, and 200,000 of our fellow Americans are dead, it's not just chance that happened. It happened because of poor choices, deliberate choice. Fix my mic. Thank you. I heard them say, oh, they always do that at these vigils. They always do it. They always get political. Yeah. If we're going to say we're going to continue this fight for gender equity, yep, we're going to get political. If we're going to continue this fight for the idea that you can marry who you want, yep, we're going to get pretty political. If we're going to continue to fight and say all are welcome here and all are valued, black, white, brown, or indigenous, yep, we're going to get political with them. And if they're going to tell us that this nation is those who have and those who have not, and some states that are blue, if their people die, it's not as important as others, or if we're going to separate children at the border from their parents and they're going to do those things, they can be damn sure we're going to get political. Because if there was anything that was clear, Justice Ginsburg's life was a political life, and it was the best of our politics. The belief that together we can make a difference in each other's lives, that justice can prevail. Fight is incumbent on each generation to fight it. So I want to thank all of you for coming here tonight. I want to share with you this sense of community in this space. But I think Rabbi Latz said it right, and I like that because it's hard sometimes, and it's been hard this year. Despair is that's the food that tyrants feed on, and we won't give them one damn bite of it. And I'll tell you what, as Gwen said, tomorrow this goes. So thank you all.
It's kind of hard to follow that. I am not a professional speaker and I'm not a lawyer. So hopefully also we'll get back on schedule here, but thank you for being here tonight. And thank you for being in this beautiful weather and this beautiful space with us. Just before I get started, I have to say thank you so much to the incredible team at Gender Justice who helped pull this event together. Obviously, our MC, Erin May Quaid, jumped right in to get the ball rolling, but I also have to mention Stephanie and Magooby and Adrian, and really just our whole fabulous team. Thank you so much. Like all of you, and like so many of our speakers have said, we're still reeling from the loss of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, especially coming towards appreciating year. I don't have to tell you, we all know we are still suffering through the global and national nightmare of the ongoing pandemic. We crossed the horrible milestone of more than 200,000 COVID-related deaths in the US this weekend. And just this past week, a brave whistleblower, a Black woman and nurse named Dawn Wooten, came forward about asylum-seeking women held in ICE detention facilities who have been subjected to hysterectomies without their consent. This is just another example of our country's shameful history of forced sterilization, a violation of bodily autonomy and reproductive justice, almost always inflicted on women of color. It is a reminder of how much work we have left to do. And with the murder of George Floyd in May here in Minneapolis, our hearts and communities have been ripped open once again by the brutal violence against Black Americans at the hands of police. We have been called to end white supremacy once and for all because Black lives matter. The weight of everything we're facing together feels impossibly heavy. I feel it deep in my bones every morning when I try to wake up. We're grieving and we're also scared. Scared for our communities, for our country, for our future. But despite all that feels bleak, please look around. In spite of everything, here we are together, wearing our masks, holding space for each other. The pandemic has shown us we humans are capable of rapidly adapting to new normals, of finding ways forward no matter the challenges. In our toughest moments, what matters is that we show up for one another and we do our part. Our speakers tonight have talked about the opportunities Ruth Bader Ginsburg was denied based only on the fact that she was a woman. Her very presence at Harvard Law School was challenged. She was rejected for clerkships. She was paid less in her first position as a law professor because she was married to a man with a well-paid job. In those early years especially, she was challenged, criticized, and undermined at every turn. But Ruth Bader Ginsburg never backed down. I know my own life wouldn't be what it is today without her work. She was a fighter who would never be silenced, and neither will we. Across the country, laws protecting women's and LGBTQ people's rights are very much at stake. The fate of the Affordable Care Act, which is actually the most recent national expansion of civil rights, is an open question. But today, here in Minnesota, I know we're ready to fight. We are a community that knows the power of speaking truth to power, of organizing our communities, and of voices that will not be silenced. So I know you probably read the headlines like me and are concerned about what the timing of RBG's death means to our democracy, the upcoming election, and the trajectory of the Supreme Court. But I want to encourage us all to keep our eyes not just on the win or the process, but also on who. Who will be the next justice to carry forth Ruth's legacy? I want a justice who recognizes the full humanity of people and who knows the truth about who suffers the most when our rights and protections don't reach everyone. I want a justice who has clarity about the future we're fighting for and how the law can help us get there. I want a justice who will be ferociously protecting my bodily autonomy and yours. That means I get to decide whether or when I get pregnant. That means my transgender friend can get the gender confirming healthcare that allows them to live their life as their truest self. And it means queer people get to love who they love without fear. I want a justice who will protect the institutions that underpin a truly representative democracy, where people actually have the power, where every vote counts. I don't know about you, but right now it has felt like Ruth was the only person standing between us and losing some of our most fundamental rights. But in truth, no one person can be expected to shoulder that much responsibility. We are the protectors of our rights. Our freedoms and civil liberties depend on us. Our vision for our future doesn't stop at protecting Ruth's legal legacy. It's about so much more. It's about building the world we truly want to live in, where our families are cared for, where everyone has access to the healthcare that they need, where we root out injustice and misogyny and white supremacy from our workplaces, our schools, every corner of our system, and our culture. That's a world where we all can thrive. I hope you'll join us in fighting for that future. And I'd love for you to do me a favor right now, even though it's dark. If you can take out your phone, open your text messages, and start a new message. Text RBG Legacy, all one word, to 66866. That's RBG Legacy to 66866. Starting tomorrow, we will connect you with ways to mobilize, to protect, and build towards that future I know we all want. We are only asking you for your email. We won't text you again. But we will help you call, email, and tweet your senators. Yes, even our senators who support gender equity need to hear from us. As a reminder, Senator Klobuchar is a member of the Judiciary Committee, and she really needs to hear from you. We truly cannot take anything for granted. We'll also connect you with opportunities to help protect our elections and get out the vote. And we'll share how you can fuel the fight for gender equity today and into our collective future. That's RBG Legacy to 66866. Thank you so much for being here, for being loud. Please be well and be righteous.
Thank you, Megan. Now we're going to hear some music from the members of the Minnesota Orchestra, Rebecca, Jenny, Megan, Sam, and Gareth. The song they're going to play is Elgar's Nimrod from his Enigma Variations. This is the piece that the Minnesota Orchestra uses for all occasions of mourning great leaders. And the last time they played it was in South Africa when Kofi Annan passed. During this song, we will light our candles. So for those of you who have the cool ones, turn them on. And for those of you who have the regular ones, there are people who have lighters in the crowd. Maybe put your phone light on. If you are lighting your candle, take your unlit candle and tip it to the lit candle. Lit candles don't tip. Lit candles stay upright. Tip and lit. And then as the music plays, if you can hold your candles in the air as you're able, we will mark the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Thank you. Thank you so much to our violists, not violinists. Next, I would like to invite up a dear friend and a partner in justice and joy with me. Please welcome Shayla Walker from Our Justice.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Shayla Walker, and I'm the Vision Realization for Our Justice, an organization dedicated to advancing reproductive freedom. As a Black woman who advocates for reproductive justice on occupied Anishinaabe and Dakota land, I come here today with a layered heaviness in my heart. I'm holding the fact that immigrant women are being given hysterectomies without their consent. I'm also holding the death of Breonna Taylor. It's been 191 days since her state-sanctioned murder. Now I have to add that we no longer have Justice Ginsburg with us. 2020 has asked us to hold so much in such a short amount of time. We know that Justice Ginsburg fought for reproductive rights until her last days. And I think that although it's truly unfortunate that we put so much stock into a single justice, not to exclude the recent work of Justice Sotomayor, I'm grateful for her tenure as Supreme Court Justice. As we reflect on the pioneering work of Justice Ginsburg, we also must remember that reproductive access and justice has always lived at the intersection of informal relationships, like aunties and grandmas taking care of children that parents weren't able to care for, and volunteer-led mutual aid work, like the abortion fund that we have at Our Justice. Our Justice was founded in 1967, before Roe v. Wade, meaning that no matter what happens in the courts, Our Justice, like hundreds of other abortion funds across the U.S., will continue to support people in accessing reproductive care. This year alone, we have already pledged $77,000 to folks accessing abortion care, and we do not intend to stop anytime soon. In fact, we have expanded our services to include lodging for folks seeking abortion care and free curbside Plan B delivery. So holler at us if you need a Plan B. When it comes to abortion in Minnesota, our state constitution provides us with more protections than our federal constitution. Our Justice, along with NARAL, Gender Justice, and 25 community partners, are leading the Unrestrict Minnesota campaign to educate Minnesotans on the lawsuits and to remove 14 laws that are barriers to abortion access, so that no matter what happens at the federal level, Minnesotans will always have abortion access. Did you know that 74% of Minnesotans believe that people should be able to access abortion without the government interfering? So we know, yeah, now you know. So we know that abortion is not the main issue. In order to have true reproductive freedom, there are many people who need to be introduced to the concept of reproductive justice. Thank you. Having the economic, social, and political power to decide when to parent, not to parent, and having the ability to parent in a safe and healthy environment. Justice Ginsburg gave her life to laying the foundation of the work that we have ahead of us. May we use the tools of reproductive justice to continue to build on her legacy and expand it so that all people holding multiple identities can benefit from our collective labor. Adelante.
Thank you, Shayla. And thank you for bringing reproductive justice into this space started by Black women in the 1990s. Thank you, Shayla. Next, I'd like to invite up Reverend Kelly Clement, the Assistant Minister at the First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, and Reverend Dwayne Davis, Senior Pastor at All God's Children.
Please join us in a litany of solidarity. And what that means is after we make these statements, we need to hear from you that you say we dissent. To the rising tide of intolerance and hate.
We dissent.
To the forces determined to take away our right to decide whether and when to become a parent.
We dissent.
To the forces of systemic racism that lead to voter suppression, mass incarceration, and police violence.
We dissent.
To the forces that ignore science.
We dissent. To the forces that deny full personhood for LGBTQ plus people.
We dissent.
To the forces that separate families and lock children in cages.
We dissent.
To authoritarianism and greed and people who imperil our lives and our planet.
We dissent.
To the forces that sow fear and despair and apathy.
We dissent.
May we rise up in our dissent, and may our voices ring out for justice.
Amazing. We do dissent and we will rise up. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I want to thank all of our organizational co-hosts, every volunteer, every person who put a minute of work into this, everybody tuning in at home. Thank you so much for celebrating the life and legacy of Ruth Bader Ginsburg with us. So I'm going to close this out. And a lot of times when I speak, I pace, and this is really hard not to grab a microphone and pace around. But I've been thinking a lot about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and what she brought to us. You know, she was a complicated person. She was not perfect because nobody is, but she gave us our work, or her work for us. And I was thinking about the articles I've read about her and the speeches I've seen her give. And I noticed that every time she spoke, she talked about the shoulders of the people that she stands on or stood on. And she always took that time to place herself in a long line of fighters and champions. And I was thinking about her dying wish, which she told her daughter that she did not want to be replaced until a new president was installed. And it got me thinking about when she was confirmed to the Supreme Court. She took the time in her introduction to say specifically, I would not be here with all of the people without the determined efforts of men and women who kept dreams of equal citizenship alive in days when few would listen. I stand on the shoulders of those brave people. And one of the brave people that she talked about was Harriet Tubman. And Harriet Tubman, when she was on her deathbed, the advice that she had for the white and black women, the white and black feminists who were fighting for the right to vote, was stick together. And it is very true that we have not always stuck together, and that right now there are forces seeking to rip us apart and farther from each other, which means that today and now we place ourselves in the long line of champions and fighters. And now we, metaphorically, stand on the shoulders of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And if she called Harriet Tubman in during her Senate confirmation, we can call those words in now. We can stick together. So I want to leave you with this. One of my favorite Ruth Bader Ginsburg quotes is, real change, enduring change, happens one step at a time. So let's take that next step together and stick together. Thank you so much for coming out. 66866, RBG Legacy, all one word. 66866, RBG Legacy, all one word. Good night.